Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Holidays of DevOps. And what we are going to do today and the next video is we're going to be working on a project. One of the things that we have done during the course of this series is from time to time, we tend to do projects that will further um, help us to understand how things connect. Because most times when we learn things in isolation. What I mean is that we learn one thing, we learn one, two. For example, you might be learning, say, you're learning Azure Virtual Network and you're learning Azure Virtual Machine. You're learning all of those things in isolation. But most times when we do projects, it helps us to understand how things connect and how things work in real life. So I think before now we've heard about two projects. Yes, so this should be either the third or the fourth project in this series. And what we are going to be doing is we are going to combine the last phase, which is Azure, and we are going to combine it with this phase, which is Terraform, to do a project. So we'll be using Terraform to do a project on Azure. So what project are we going to do today? We are going to be doing something called, we are going to be setting up something called an Azure Landing Zone. Yes, an Azure Landing Zone. We are going to do that using Terraform. And what is an Azure Landing Zone? So if you check the documentation, so basically, an Azure Landing Zone is a standardized and recommended approach for all organizations utilizing Azure. It provides a consistent way to set up and manage your Azure environment at scale and all of that. So, in simple terms, basically, for what an Azure Landing Zone is that before you run any application or any workload on Azure, you must have set up the foundation. It's just like you wanting to build a house. Before you build the house, of course, you would have gotten the land, you would have done the foundation. So Azure Landing Zone, in simple terms, is like that land or that foundation in which you can now build or you can now set up your application on. Everything has been done, network segmentation has been done for you, all the security practices has been set up, the management rules, and so all you need to do is just you bring your application and then you host it on or you set it up on that landing zone. So this is a typical landing zone example, and when you look at this, it looks really overwhelming, right? It can be overwhelming, it can be intimidating at the first glance, but um, we are not going to use this. We are going to set up something simple. If we want to have this set up, I mean, it's going to actually take weeks to actually do something like this. So we're going to do something simple that we can finish within a day or two. And yes, so this is what we're going to do. We have our own small copy of our landing zone. So I'm just going to explain what we're trying to achieve here. So what we want to do is we want to use Terraform to provision a landing zone that has a resource group. So this landing zone is basically for deployment of a three-tier application using containers. So a three-tier application using containers, we have the front end, which is the web, the um, business logic part, which is the app, and then we have our database. So we set up the resource group, we set up the virtual network. Then obviously for security reasons, each part of the application will have its own subnet for security reasons because you don't want all of them to be in the same subnet. You want to create network segmentation as effective as possible so that the web doesn't talk to the database. Only the app subnet can talk to the database. The web only talks to the app, and then the app talks to the database. So we're going to have one virtual network. Inside the virtual network, we'll have three subnets: one for web, one for app, and one for database. So sorry, in those subnets, we're also going to create NSG roles. NSG, we know what NSGs are. Basically, everything we are doing here are things that we've covered during the Azure part of this journey. So if you're still confused about all this thing, you probably have skipped that part. And that's why I keep emphasizing that everything we do is layered on what we have done before. So We create network security groups and policies around each subnet to help know, okay, which part is communicating with which part and which part is not going to communicate with which part. So apart from that, we have our container registry where we have our containers from, because like I said, it's a containerized application. So we have our container registry, we have our log analytics workspace for monitoring, and then we have our storage account where we have containers, one for keeping artifacts. Artifacts are basically, let's say something like logs and all of that from each container. Yes, it's just like where you keep things, data that you can audit, that you can check and see. Okay, if you want to review and all of that, then we'll have our. Then I think the next stage will be to set up a remote backend. I think that's like the final thing we'll do. So I hope we've been able to understand like an overview. So we are setting up quite a number of resources. We have one resource, we might set up one or two resource groups. We might have one virtual network. We have three subnets. We have three network security groups. We have one container registry, one log analytics workspace, and one storage account, maybe 2 to 3 containers. So in total, you might be having about 20 resources, and we're going to set that up using Terraform. So um, that said, I'm just going to show how the structure will be. And we're going to use Terraform modules. We're going to use Terraform modules in order to get this um, done. So how we want to do it is we have the base, like we have the roots where we have our we have the normal structure provider.tf, provider.tf. We have our main.tf. We have our variables.tf. We have our terraform.tf_vrs. We have our output.tf. Then we have our modules, which is these are all files. These are files, but the module is a folder. If you watch the video on modules, modules is a folder. So in modules, under modules, we have the we're creating NSG. So we'll have the okay, we're creating VNet. We'll have the VNet or network module, which we'll use to create our VNet and our subnet. Then we'll have the a separate module for NSG, which will create all the rules and the policies and all of that. Then we'll have a separate module for storage. Storage. We'll have a separate module for the container registry, ACR, and then we'll have one extra module. Let me see. Yes, so we have the log analysis workspace. That's the monitoring, monitoring, monitoring module. Now, this in each of this module, we'll create three files. We'll create the main.tf. We'll have the variables.tf, and finally we'll have the output.tf. So if you have been following, you would understand this structure. So we'll have it for all in all of the modules. So okay, we have ACR, and then we have monitoring. Let me reduce the font. Okay, so this is like an overview of how the folder structure will be. Then we'll still include our backend.tf. That's when we want to do the remote backend. Let me just put it there. Backend.tf. So as at the time you're watching this video, this This code will already be in a GitHub repository, and I'm going to attach the GitHub repository there so you can use it as a project, as your own personal project. If you want to tweak one or two things, you can tweak it and then use it as yours. So most likely, I will not be committing this particular file, terraform.tfvrs, and all the other ones that you need to put in the Git ignore. So whatever file that you don't see on the GitHub repository, you might have to create it. Maybe you watch the video and then you see how it is done. So this is like an overview. I hope we've been able to get a big picture of what we want to do. This is what we are trying to create. We're trying to create this landing zone, this environment, and this is the way we are going to structure everything, right? So um good. So let's go to our terminal and then we'll start getting things done brick by brick. So the first thing you want to do is I already have sample of the entire code base here. I took my time to actually go through and then ensure that everything is working fine. I didn't want to have to start writing everything from like on this video because it's going to take a whole lot of time and then it's going to take so long. So if you're wondering how I was able to write it, you probably maybe you've not watched the previous video. You can always come here and come to the documentation, whatever you want, whatever you need. You can always search for it. If you want remote backend, you search for it. If you want network security group, you search for it, and then you tweak it according to what you need. So yes, this is where I got the samples of whatever I use, and I tweaked it to my own preference. So we'll begin immediately. So first of all, you create a directory, Azure DevOps Landing Zone Terraform, which I've done here already. So and then we'll start putting things in place. So I'm going to make a directory. Inside a directory for our modules, we are creating 5 modules, like I said: network, energy, storage, monitoring, and ACR. So I'll go to my terminal here and sorry, I'll click on new terminal and okay, I'll change this to WSL. So this command helps us to create a mkdir-p helps us to make a folder inside a folder. So we are creating the modules folder or directory, and then we are creating 5 more directories or folders inside the modules directory. So when I click enter, so you can see that I already have the modules here. And if I click the drop down, you'll see that I have the 5 different modules that we are going to use for this project. So take it one step at a time. So the first thing we want to do is in your main, let's create this, let's create our main root folders. We'll do main.tf, main.tf, we need providers.tf, we need variables.tf, we need terraform.tf and we need output.tf. So I've also created the root files that we need. So we have these files now: main.tf, output.tf, providers.tf, terraform.tf, VRS, and variables.tf. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to set up the provider. Provider is Microsoft Azure. So I'm just going to copy and we have this. Okay, I'll save. And what we have next is variables.tf. So I'm going to copy this. So we're still going to add to this, but I mean, this is like the starting point. So the variables we want to define, want to define the location, want to define project. Project means I want to have like a certain naming convention. So I need a constant name that I can just add. Maybe I can use as a prefix to other names. So that's project. That's project keyword for naming. Then we have the resource group name. We have the VNet CIDR, that's the IP address. We have the subnets, and then we have tags. So we're going to start with this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think about 6 or 7. So we're starting there. And what's next? We have, okay, so once we define our variables, we need to define TF-VARs. Like I always say, there's no variables without this or that one. They go hand in hand. Variables is like the form. TF-VARs is like the values. So, and of course, same thing here. We're still going to add more to it as we progress. Okay, so I'm just going to explain. We define the project. So the project is tech.sam. The location is West Europe. Resource group name, we've defined it RG tech.sam. Let's say it's a dev environment, so we're going to use that. Then the VNet header range is 10.20.0.0/16. That's what we are using. And out of that VNet, we said we are going to have 3 subnets. So we are creating the subnet for the web, subnet for the app, and subnet for data, just like we have in our architecture. Then just have some tags, right? So we'll proceed. Okay, so we have like basic things. Now let's go into those modules one after the other. So we'll go and fill in the modules, starting from the network module. I will start from the variables. So I'm going to copy this. I'll come to the network module. Network module. Okay, I need to create some files. Variables.tf. I need to create another file. Main.tf. And lastly, output.tf. Like I said, this is what we're going to be doing in every file, that every of the module that we are creating. So I'll put this here. So for the network, we need a VNet name, we need the location, we need the resource group name, we need the CIDR range, subnet, and tags. Basically, it is what we've defined in our Terraform.tf here. So that's why you notice that we only have main, output, and variables. We don't have providers, and we don't have variables. We don't have Terraform.tf in those modules. That is because when we define it in our main.tf, that's the main.tf of the root module, it will take all these values from provider.tf and terraform.tf VRS in the root module. So yes, so I hope that is clear. So we need to define our main.tf. Okay, so main.tf. Okay, so for the main.tf, we are creating our virtual network, and the virtual network is VNet. Then we are going to, this is what you used to call a variable. I mean, this is not new again. So we're using this to call the variable VNet variable, which is the name, right? Then the location and the resource group. Okay, variable dot name. This is the name I'm referring to. Let me come here. Let me save this. Okay, where is it? 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 Okay, so this is it. This is the variable we're referring to, name. So when we want to reference it in our main.tf file, we just pass the name, right? So that's so we have the VNet CIDR range and with tags. Now for the subnet, we are going to use a loop. We're going to use a for loop. We don't need to, since loop helps us create things that like repeatedly. So we're going to use a for loop to create 3 subnets. You're creating, that's why you see the for each. For each is like a for loop that can be used to create a number of subnets. So that's the only thing you need for creating a virtual network. You create the network and you create the subnet. Then what outputs do we want? We want the output of the VNet ID, we want the output of the VNet name, and we want the output of the subnet ID. So I'm going to put this here. So all of these things, you can see them from the documentation, right? And then secondly, like I always say, before you start writing blocks of code, before you start, trying to do things programmatically, you must have done things using the portal. You must have done it. We call it click-offs. If you don't know how to create these resources on the portal by clicking through, you might not be able to create them programmatically because you need to have a clear idea of what is required to create something. Most times resources are not created in isolation. You can some like resource group, you can create a resource group by itself. But let's say you want to create a virtual machine, you can't just start creating a virtual machine. There are other things that are involved in creating a virtual machine. So that is why it is good for you to always know how to do it on the portal first before you start doing things programmatically and start automating things. So that's it. So now we've defined our network module. We are now going to call this network module in the main.tf. So that's what we're going to do now. So this is the main.tf. That's our root main.tf. Our root main.tf. So first off, you have to define the resource group, obviously, and then module, we call the network module. Now you can see that we've passed in that name. So var.project, which we refer to in our project. Then we want this name to 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 be like the continuation and then resource and all of that. So yes, so it's as simple as this. And then we need our output. I think I've done the output. Okay. Okay. So we wanted the resource group name, the VNet name, and the subnet ID as the outputs here. Okay. So we want the output to display the resource group name, the VNet name, and the subnet name. Now, remember that we also have an output.ts here. This is displaying the VNet ID, the VNet name, and the subnet ID. And we have here resource group name, VNet name, subnet ID. So that means we are expecting four outputs: the resource group name, the VNet name, the subnet IDs, and the VNet ID because this is actually repeated here. So I'm just going to do Terraform. I think I've saved everything. Let's initialize Terraform. Terraform, FMC. Let's see if we're going to get anything. Okay. Terraform validate. Let's validate that our syntax is okay. Module is not yet informed. It's not yet installed. Yes, I know. So run Terraform init. So we're going to initialize everything. And once that is done, we'll run Terraform plan to see what is going to be created. However, we will not run Terraform apply until we are done with everything. So we'll keep running Terraform plan for each module that we create. We'll run Terraform plan to see the resources, and that's why we have the output. So we'll see the output that it is bringing, and then we'll see the number of resources that to keep increasing with time. So let's give this a sec for us to see what it is going to create. Okay, so that has created a Terraform file, which is used to track the modules and the provider. Okay, so Terraform init. So run Terraform plan. Okay, so Terraform plan will show us resources that are going to be created without creating it. So we are not going to be creating the resources until we have everything. So now we can see our terraform.log.htl. We can see our terraform.tfstate.log.info, and then we can see our terraform.tfstate file, which is used to track all our activities that we are doing in this project so far. So let's give it a sec for Terraform plan to show us what Terraform is going to create with this small setup that we have done. Okay, so from our Terraform plan, we can see that it is creating 5 resources, 0 to destroy, 0 to change. And those 5 resources are the resource group, the VNet, and the subnet. So we cannot see the subnet IDs. This can only be seen after creation, but we can see our resource group name that we created. We can also see the VNet name that we created. So we've finished the part for networking. Let's move to creating the NSGs. So variable.tf. So I'm just going to copy this. So I'll come to NSG. I'll create the same 3 files, variables.tf. I'll create main.tf, and I'll create outputs.tf. Okay, so variables.tf, I'll put this here. Okay, so I'm just going to explain this obvious resource group name, location, NSG name, subnet IDs. So now for every NSG you create, obviously there will be an inbound row. So and this is the inbound row. This is like a variable for the inbound row, and that's that about that. Then think when we check our main.tf, that's when we'll see, okay. So I'll copy this. This is the main.tf. And it's basically like the same thing. You're creating the network security group, and then you're creating the network row. And remember that we have 3 NSGs. So that is why we're also using a loop here. We're using a loop for the 3 NSGs. So and we are, of course, NSGs are attached to either the network interface card or the subnet. So we are attaching this to the subnet. So and that's why we are specifying the subnet ID of what we are going to attach it to. So yes, if you watch the Azure video, you will understand what I just said. When energy is associated with either the network interface card or the subnet. So let's okay. We want output to be our NSG ID and the NSG name. So there's a high chance that we won't see the NSG ID until after creation, but I think we are going to see the NSG name. Okay, so now we've defined the module. Now let's go and update the main files. So I'm going to copy this, go to our main.tf, and just underneath this, I'll paste this. So what did we do? Okay, this is in network module. Okay, so this is the NSG. So now we are creating 3 NSGs because we have 3 subnets. So this is the first NSG, and the rows, we created the rows, the inbound and the outbound row. So second one for the application, we can see the inbound and then the third one. So now you can see now that if you look here, for the web, we have 2 rows. That's for HTTP and HTTPS. Port 80 here is for HTTP. Port 443 is for HTTPS. So you can either access this application using the HTTP or HTTPS. But in a case where you don't want HTTP, you can take this out and just have just HTTPS. Now, for the app, remember I said if we come back to here, so the web can talk to the app, then the app can talk to the database, but web cannot talk to database cannot talk to the app. So in our NSG rule, what we have specified is that for the app, the source IP address is a web subnet. The source IP address is the web subnet. So only inbound connection from the web subnet will be accepted on this particular subnet. And for the data subnet, the source IP address is the app subnet. So only inbound connections from the app subnet will be accepted on data subnet. So I don't know if that is clear enough. So okay, then we want output. On the output, the values for each of those the NSG names for the three subnets. So we'll add this to output.tf. Okay. So let's move to the storage. Storage is for artifacts and storage is you create the artifacts and for TF state, yes. So when I come to storage, I'll create the same three files, variables.tf, create main.tf, and create output.tf. Okay, so put the variables. So resource group name, location, storage account name, the containers that we're going to create, and the tags. So those are the variables that we're going to define here. And in our main.tf, I think we've created a storage account with a container before. So this should not be new, where you have your storage account and container. Only this time around, we are having three containers. We're having two containers rather. So one for artifacts, one for the TF state. So this, okay. Okay, so I'm just going to save this. I think this is not saved also. I save this. Okay, so what's next? Then what outputs we want to see? We want to see the storage account name, want to see the container names, and then want to see the container IDs. So we're done with the storage. We'll just go and update our main document. So storage account name is a variable. We'll add to this. Of course, once you have a variable, you must add the corresponding value to the TF VRS. So just beneath this, save and main.tf. We need to call that module in our main.tf. So we're calling the storage module in our main.tf, resource group name, the location, storage account name, and the container. So it's creating two containers, TF state and artifacts in this particular storage account. And then we need output. We need output. Okay. So the output is the storage account name and the containers. So save that. So I think that's pretty much all with containers. So move to our log analytics workspace and we have the monitoring module for that. So monitoring, I'm just going to create those three files, variables.tf, variables.tf, yes, main.tf, and outputs.tf. Okay, so for the variables, we are going to put the resource group name, the location, the workspace because we're creating a workspace, and then the tags. So in our main.tf, we're just going to create the workspace. So you can check the documentation. This is basically what you need to create workspace and the output. So we want to see the workspace ID and we want to see the workspace name. Okay, so we need to update that in our main files. So we're adding these to our variables.tf. Okay, and obviously we need a corresponding value for that. Okay, and then we need our main.tf to call that module. And finally, the output that we want. Okay, output is already there. Okay, so I think the last thing we need to create is the container registry. So I think we've done for storage, we've done for NSG, we've done for networking, we've done for monitoring, and then finally we need ACR. So do variables.tf for the main.tf, and we are going to do outputs.tf. Okay, so variables, put our variables, resource group location. So we need ACR name, we need the SK, which is basic, and tags. So we've created an ACR before, so this should not be entirely new. Then in our main.tf for the ACR module, we'll put this there, save. And for outputs, we need the ACR name, the login server, and then ACR ID. Okay, so now we are done with the modules. So we're just going to update our main files so that we can, I think once this is, that is the last thing, then we can now run our Terraform init and plan and then we'll apply. So variables, save this and corresponding value. Okay, and then we need to call the ACR module. Okay, and last but not the least, we need our output. Okay, so we've written 5 modules that creates 5 or more resources, at least minimum of 5 or more resources. So we have the module for the ACR, module for the networking, module for for monitoring, module for NSG, and we have module for storage. And then we've referenced all these modules in our main.tf file with all the variables, the outputs, and everything that we need to get this project up and running. So I just want to clear all of this, clear all of this, and okay. So I want to have just the main.tf. Great. So we have our main.tf. We can see that it's not even, it's just 127 lines of code. Imagine all we did was we just calling those modules. Imagine if we wanted to like write everything, the entire module inside one main.tf. Imagine how many lines of code could we be writing, we'll be talking of, and then it can be overwhelming sometimes. So I'm just going to Terraform init to initialize those other modules. Okay, so to initialize these other modules, because if you don't do that, if you skip the Terraform init and go to Terraform plan, it will tell you that those other modules are not found. So as you can see it here, it's energy app module, energy data in modules, energy wave, storage, blah blah blah, and all of that. Okay, so Terraform init has initialized all the modules. So I'll run Terraform plan. Let's see what will be the output, and then we'll see the number of resources that it is going to create. So if we go to our portal, we'll check, let me go back to the portal. Okay, so let's go to resource group. So from what we have here, we still have just two resource group, the 100 days of DevOps resource group and the network water resource group. So once we have initialized this, once we do Terraform apply, we're supposed to see the third resource group. And once we go into those resource group, we're supposed to see all of the resources that we have created, and we'll verify them to be sure that those resources were created the way we have defined them to be created. So let's check. Okay. Okay, so the Terraform plan has run successfully. So we moved from having, let me go up, let me go up. And initially we had 5 resources to create, but now we are having close to 20 resources we're going to create. So we're creating the resource group, we are creating the ACR, we are creating the log analytics workspace, we are creating the subnet, the first subnet, the second subnet, the third subnet, the VNet, the NSG, that's the first NSG, the second NSG, the third NSG. Okay. Then what else do we have? Okay, that's the rows. Then we have the rows. Okay, the different rows. Okay, this is the storage account. So and all of that. Um, yeah, the first container, the second container, and finally a summary is we have 20 things to create now, and these are the outputs that it is going to show us as of now. We can't see the others until after applying. So we're going to do Terraform apply or to approve, and let's see where this takes us. Okay, so we ran into an error while trying to create this, and it said retention days property does not match the SKU limit and blah 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 and all of that. So let me see if anything can be gotten from this. I'm sure some resources should have been created though, but just want to follow the link. Okay, while that is loading, um, let's see. Let's see if I have anything useful here. Do I have anything useful here? Mm. Okay, so I'm not sure I have anything useful. So I'm just going to, I'll just go to the code and I'll change this. This is for monitoring main.tf. So I'm just going to change this to 30. Okay, I'll change the attention this to 30. I'll save. So I think because of the SKU, the retention days is actually 30 by default. So I'm going to try this again. Terraform apply. So it's only going to create the log analytics workspace. It won't go ahead and create other things. So, but while that is running, let's check what has been created. So let's come to our portal. Okay, this timed out. So I'm expecting that some resources should have been created or might not have been created, but I'm expecting that a lot of resources should have been created. Okay, so we have the resource group, which is the first thing. So let's go back to this. So we're going to let me check my VS Code. I should have done auto approve. Now I have to monitor this. So the first thing is the resource group. And from what we have here, resource group was created. Okay. Then the next thing we have is the virtual network. So let's check. Okay, so virtual network was created and it has the name. And when we go into that virtual network, we have it's supposed to have three subnets. So let's go into the virtual network and see if we have the three subnets created. Okay, so you can see it here, subnet 3. So when I click on it, I'm supposed to see the subnets. So we have our subnets, the app subnet, data subnet, and the web subnet. And you can see that they are all attached to a network security group, three network security groups. So since so far we've created the resource group, the virtual network, three subnets, and the network security group. So let's check what else has been created. So if we go back to, let me go back here, go back to the resource group, and okay, we have we have our container registry. ACR was created. We have our storage account. So let's check if the two containers are in the storage account. Mm, 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 mm. So let's see storage browser. So let's check block containers and just check. Let's check. Let's check. So we have the two containers created, the artifact container and the TF state containers created. So far we have almost everything created except the log analytics workspace. So failed to obtain provider could not load the schema provider registry as capability to initiate blah blah blah. Okay, I think this timed out. So I'm just going to apply it again. I'll apply it again and I think this is actually a good place to pause this video, and then in the next session we're going to complete it and also do our TSP backend, and we'll call it a wrap for this particular project. So I'll see you on the next video. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.